Breaking news. To all the people currently residing in Bulgaria and all the Bulgarian citizens around the world, due to the rapid spread of the epidemic, the Ministry of Defense has decided to put the entire country under quarantine. All citizens shall not therapy, shall not proceed to exit their homes until they are given the permission to do so, since they may already be infected with the disease. Symptoms may include allergic reactions to Bulgaria due to extreme dissatisfaction with your surroundings, blurry vision because of prejudiced views, issues with communication. The only way infected people can express their views is through condemning everything and everyone in Bulgaria, combined with above-than-average use of profanity and cynicism. If you display any of the aforementioned symptoms, it is highly likely you're suffering from excessive pessimism, and the Bulgarian mutation can be extremely violent. So, pessimism in Bulgaria can be viewed as the chronic disease of our nation, transmitted from generation to generation. Therefore, first and foremost, we're going to look at the problems this disease creates and how it affects each member of our society. Secondly, we will examine the possible causes of this outbreak and the way it spreads amongst Bulgarians. And finally, we shall seek means of eradicating this widespread disease, or our solution. So what's the situation like? In a 2009 Gallup poll, Bulgaria ranked at the very bottom of the world in their views of what life would be like 5 years hence. Incredibly, Bulgarian pessimism outperformed that of Iraqis and Afghans. So what makes an average Bulgarian more pessimistic than a person who lives in a country ravaged by the atrocities of war? And why should we bother? Why should you bother? Personally speaking, if you ask most of my acquaintances, chances are they'll tell you I'm a pessimist. However, in my daily life, from my friend who throws litter on the ground and says, well, everyone does that anyways, to the one who discourages me from recycling says, that's Bulgaria, they all end up in the same dump, to a great number of my peers who refuse to vote because they believe it's all going to be the same eventually, I've noticed that pessimism here inevitably leads to other, way more detrimental tendencies than the gloomy outlook of the present and future itself. So now, let's begin with examining all of the threats pessimism poses to our society. So pessimism creates this never-ending vicious cycle reinforced by all of our surroundings. It begins undoubtedly with negativity, which is then followed by a sense of helplessness, and these two determine the lack of constructive change everyone complains about. The Bulgarian state thus seems to be stuck in a catch-22. We are currently facing a social crisis because we are dissatisfied with the fact that nothing gets better, while we resign our responsibilities to make this situation better. What's the point in trying to change anything? Sigh desperately most Bulgarians, since it would be so much easier if we shrug our shoulders and tell ourselves the system is broken. However, we fail to acknowledge the fact that when the system is broken, we are the ones responsible for fixing it. This way, our negativity becomes a justification for our collective inaction. If you go on the street and ask a few passers-by how they feel about Bulgaria, the most likely responses you'd get are probably, the situation is hopeless, there are no prospects of getting better, or the mafia runs the country. Bruce Hornsby's "That's just the way it is, some things will never change" has become our national anthem, and these notions are now a part of our philosophy. The problems this philosophy creates, however, are not to be undermined by any means. From the marked increase of cardiovascular diseases, commonly associated not only with poor health habits and nutrition, but also with elevated levels of social stress, to the general demographic crisis our country has faced since the 1990s, or in other words, the outflow of young, capable people leaving Bulgaria in order to seek for a more rewarding life in the West. The latter is seen as most Bulgarians as the tragedy of our generation. People choose immigration over striving for a better lifestyle here, because of the familiar statement, I'm incapable of changing anything, might as well get out of here. Now, in order to understand the specific features of pessimism on Bulgarian soil, we ought to examine the possible causes of this phenomenon. Well, some might argue that we are pessimists because, indeed, our situation is hopeless. We are devastated by poverty, inequality, crime, and inadequate access to social services. Nevertheless, these social issues occur in other countries and are certainly way more daunting in some places. Pessimism, however, remains a distinct Bulgarian feature, and even in comparison to Romania, a country displaying no significant difference to Bulgaria in terms of its economic development, the differences are outstanding. The last Eurobarometer survey indicates that only 35% of Bulgarians describe themselves as happy overall, compared to 68% of Romanians. Pessimism can be attributed to numerous reasons, but what lies at the core of them is our lack of confidence. The collective insecurities have been enshrined in our mindsets from early childhood, in a nursery rhyme sort of way. You know, sweetie, only those who have money and connections succeed here. This discouraging thinking pattern is further imposed by media, or sweet, Bulgarians like to call it the fourth power, although it may have more influence than actual authorities. Our negativity is blatantly projected on the silver screen, and at that point it becomes contagious, affecting every household it reaches. Whenever we tune on the news, we are bombarded with the usual headlines. Bulgarian population decreasing at alarming rates. Bulgaria ranks 5th last for primary education, last for welfare and satisfaction among the 28 EU member states. Last. We're so used to hearing this word, it doesn't even face us. Media outlets play a key role in presenting Bulgaria as the shabby, dirty orphan of the European Union, failing to acknowledge the fact that our GDP has benefited from a slow but steady rise in recent years, or the improvements in our labor market. In 2002, 56% of Bulgarians aged 20 to 24 had a job. Last year, the figure was 64%, higher than the one in Italy. Another correlated cause for our lack of confidence is the nostalgia to the past and the never-ending urge to compare ourselves to other countries. From sociology, this is the theory of relative deprivation, or perceptions resulting from unfavorable comparison to higher status member groups or to personal experiences from the past. Last, but certainly not least, a key part of the Bulgarian psyche is exaggerating the positive parts of living abroad and the drawbacks of staying here. A lot of Bulgarians actually believe that once they immigrate, all of their problems will be wiped away. We frantically try to get out of our country, most of us only to put up with being the low-paid worker abroad. So now that we are familiar with all of the problems and implications of this disease, all that's left for us is finding a cure. Question: how to break the cycle of collective apathy? Collectively. Instead of using our disillusionment as an alibi for our inaction, we should employ it as our driving force towards more social engagement. Our critical thinking, paired with a sense of individual responsibility and the belief that not everything in Bulgaria has to be corrupt or gloomy, makes a Bulgarian optimist. An optimist is not blissfully unaware of the problems in the system. An optimist acknowledges them, takes action, persuades others to do likewise, and most importantly, believes that things can get better. So, where to find these Bulgarian optimists? The mirror may hold a reflection of a potential one. Let's stop dwelling so much on negative statistics. Humans are not merely numbers, and a chart cannot simply depict our complexities. Let's stop paying so much attention on our past either, and focus more on our future instead. We've once been a great power, yes, but times have changed. We've overcome a myriad of obstacles, and comparing ourselves to other countries won't help us since the start is not equal. For some country rankings similar to Billboard music charts do not have to discourage us from trying to improve. Dun dun dun. Breaking news. Dear citizens, after careful examination of this one-of-a-kind illness, we decided to declare end of quarantine. Unlike any other disease, quarantine could possibly be the worst action or lack of action you can undertake. For you cannot be enclosed in your home the same way your mind cannot be enclosed in its own comfort zone of justifying its own inactions with the question, why should I bother?